Hi everybody, it's Stephanie here. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am very excited because I'm making a scary shark cake. You guys know that I love playing games with my family, so when I saw this Jaws themed game, I knew I had to make a shark cake to match it. Alright, let's get started. I've already cut my board and I made a hole right in the center. This bottom tier is a 12-inch round. I wanted it to be a shorter tier, so I only baked one 12-inch round cake, which I leveled and then I torted. I'm filling it with my American buttercream recipe, which I will put a link to in the description box. And using my offset spatula, I then make a perfectly even layer of buttercream frosting, and then I pop on that top layer of cake. And then I give it a layer of buttercream on the top and the sides too. To smooth out my sides, I grab my bench scraper and I run it along the sides until it's nice and smooth. For the top, I use the same scraper and I scrape the buttercream off that top edge and in towards the center of the cake. To make it even more smooth, I'm dipping my offset spatula into a glass of hot water. I dry it off with a paper towel and then I go around the cake with the hot spatula, and again around the top too. Next up is the fondant. I'm using black satinized fondant that I'm rolling out with my Wilton rolling pin. I drape it over the rolling pin and then I unroll it onto the cake. And next I'm smoothing it out with my fondant smoothers. This one was pretty easy since it's a short tier. My cake is ready to go onto my structure. I start by picking up my cake with a spatula and I gently slide it down the metal rod. Remember, my bottom cake board has a hole in the center so I can easily slide it down into place. When you are stacking cakes, you always need supports. For my supports in this cake, I'm using plastic straws. I've cut them all down to the exact height of the cake and I insert them down into my cake. Alright, next up is working on the shark. For this one, let me show you all these cakes that I baked. So I have here a 10-inch round cake, 2 9-inch cakes, 2 8-inch cakes, and a 6-inch cake. All these cakes have been leveled and torted. I also have printed out a shark template for myself to use. I just found the image online and I increased the size in Photoshop and printed it out. Before I start stacking these cakes, I went ahead and cut it just a little so I could visualize it better. I didn't really have to do that, but it was okay. To protect my black cake, I'm covering it with plastic wrap. Don't poke it through the rod like I'm doing here because it was actually really hard to get out later, but definitely cover it so you don't damage the cake. Here's my next board, which also has a hole right down the center, and then I begin layering up my cakes and my buttercream frosting. I typically try not to go over 5 inches without supports, so I'm stopping here after about 4 inches and I'm adding 4 more dowels. And then goes on my next board and more cake and buttercream layers. Once I've added another 4 layers of cake, I then add more supports and another board. This will actually be my last board. And then I stack my final layers of cake and buttercream frosting. When I'm making a 3D cake, I always love having a model to look at. So I got this shark statue on Amazon, and it really helped me get an idea of what a shark looks like from all sides. Next up is the hardest part for me, the carving. Using my serrated knife, I begin slowly cutting away the cake. Just hold the template up to the cake and use it as a guide. Just cut off a little bit at a time. For the front, I didn't have a template, so I'm guessing at how it looks by using my 3D model, and I do the same for the back too. It basically looks like a cone shape, so if you think about that, it makes it a little bit easier while cutting. For the mouth, I get my template back out, and as you can see, I've cut out the mouth from my paper template, and I use my X-Acto knife to mark where I want to cut. Using a smaller knife, I start cutting away the inside of the mouth. I ran into a little problem because one of my boards wasn't cut small enough, so I used my X-Acto knife to cut the board too. You just have to be really careful not to get any stray pieces of the board into the cake. Now that I have my cake carved, I start covering it with chocolate ganache. I love working with chocolate ganache. It's a 2-to-1 ratio, which means I have 2 parts chocolate to 1 part heavy cream. Not only does this ganache set up beautifully, but it tastes amazing. I felt like the mouth area needed to be a little bit bigger and sharper right around the mouth opening, so I'm adding some modeling chocolate right around this edge. And I blend that in the best that I can. It does get a little messy, but that's okay. it still tastes good. While I'm here, I went ahead and used my thumbs to press into the cake where the eyes will be. My ganache has set up nicely, so it's not too sticky. Okay, it's time to decorate my shark. First, I'm covering the inside of the mouth with a piece of dark red fondant. To get the fondant to stick, I've brushed the inside with some edible glue, but you could also use some simple syrup, vodka, or piping gel. Once I have the fondant into place, I'm cutting away the excess. To texturize the inside of the mouth, I'm using just a little square of a non-slip pad. You can really use any kind of rough-looking texture mat that you have, or just scratch it up by hand. To create the shark's gums, I'm pressing a ball tool into my fondant all around the inside edge of the mouth. Next, I'm adding more modeling chocolate above the mouth because I thought it needed to be a little bit thicker in this area. However, if I were to do this again, I would use cake pop filling instead of modeling chocolate because I think it's always best to go with cake. I knew that covering this cake in fondant wouldn't be easy, so I decided to start with the front section under the mouth. This fondant is actually a 50-50 mix of satin ice and modeling chocolate. Once I had it covered, I got my template back out and I traced around it so I could get it to the right shape. Alright, there we go, and now I'm smoothing that out with a flexible plastic smoother. Alright, next I'm covering one side of my shark with fondant. And I'm cutting it right down the center, making a straight line. And then I repeat the process for the other side, covering and cutting the fondant with my X-Acto knife. For the back, you can see where the other line is, so I'm using my X-Acto knife to cut right next to that line, and then I push that seam together to blend it the best that I can. Next, I'm smoothing it out with my hands and my plastic smoother. It's really starting to come together at this point, which is always exciting. On to the airbrushing. To darken the inside of the mouth, I'm lightly spraying the inside of the mouth with black airbrush color. I want it to be darker in the back and lighter up towards the teeth. Next, I'm airbrushing all over the shark with light gray. I should have covered my black cake with plastic wrap to protect it at this point, but I got really excited to airbrush and then I forgot. Oh well. Once I have it covered completely in gray, I then added a little shading of darker gray color around the mouth, eyes, and nose. I got a little crazy with the airbrush and added some black shading and also some pearl color to make it a little bit shimmery. Okay, next I'm creating my shark's eyes. To make these, I'm rolling out a thick piece of black fondant and I place a piece of plastic wrap over the top of it and I cut out a circle. I like using plastic wrap like this when I want the edges to be rounded. And then I attach the eyes to the cake with some edible glue. To make the eyes shiny, I made a glaze with 1 teaspoon of vodka and a teaspoon of corn syrup. I mixed those together and then I brushed that onto the eye. Next up are the teeth. My shark's teeth are made out of modeling chocolate, but you can use fondant or gum paste, whatever you have on hand. And I just model a tooth shape. It's basically just a triangle shape, and then I attach that to my shark with edible glue. I ended up making a bunch of teeth in all different sizes. I did a couple of rows of teeth, which I think looked pretty scary. To dirty up the teeth, I brushed them with some black food color dust. You just have to wait until the teeth have dried onto the cake so they don't fall off while you're dusting them. For my board, I decided I wanted to use up my leftover fondant and modeling chocolate mix, so I colored a pretty shade of teal and mixed in some Tylose powder so it would harden. I rolled it out and covered my board with it. It took a few different pieces, but I eventually got it all covered and smoothed out. I wanted my board to look like the ocean, so I airbrushed it around the edges with a dark shade of blue. You have to be careful not to smudge it when moving it. If I were to do this again, I would cover the board first so it would have time to dry out. Next up, I'm creating a different water effect around the shark. This is a thick royal icing that I've colored a few different shades of blue. Using a palette knife, I'm brushing the icing upward to create a small wave. I also added a little white to the top of the wave, and I did this all around the shark. Just a few more details to go. For the word Jaws, I've colored some modeling chocolate red, and I'm rolling this out. I picked modeling chocolate for the letters because I like how it holds its shape, unlike fondant. I have a template printed out, and I'm tracing around the letters with a pointy modeling tool. When you take the template off, you then can see the tracing right on the chocolate. And then I cut those letters out with my X-Acto knife. See how sharp those letters are? They look so pretty. And next I get those onto my black tier. The final detail is hot gluing a pretty red ribbon around my board. I love doing that, it really finishes it off. Here it is, all finished. My Jaws cake is complete. Thank you all for watching. I hope you learned how to make your own scary shark cake. If you have any ideas for me, please let me know down in the comment section. All right, I'll see you guys next time. Bye.